Hello, everyone. We're back with another. You're back with another. Oh. You're back with another. Oh. You're back with an. Oh. Oh my God! Stop. There we go. Oh my. That was gonna be a problem. Forgot to mute myself there. That could have been pretty sketchy and annoying. But yeah, we are back with another Rings of Power review, episode 6. I guess to start off, it's slightly more exciting as we finally get some action, we get some fights, we get some story progression. Most questions still aren't answered yet, but we got a little bit of answers to some questions. Let's see. But I guess overall, the episode is not without its problems. There's still quite a few problems with the show's writing, in my opinion. But it was at least more entertaining, I feel. Still not as good as it could have been, but at least I wasn't bored. So that's something, right? Not being bored while watching the show. This episode all takes place or follows the Arondir and Numenor storyline finally coming together. There's no hobbits, there's no Elrond, dwarves, nothing. It is truly just those two stories together. It starts off with Adar rallying the troops, the orcs and the men that have joined him. They're going to attack the Elven Tower. And oh my God, I just realized what this quest is. He's rallying them together and they're gonna go attack the Elf Tower. So they go about doing that. They get there and there isn't actually anyone there isn't anyone there. All the villagers are all gone for whatever reason. And it turns out it was a trap. And Arondir shoots a couple orcs, and then he shoots a flaming arrow at a rope, burns the rope, and then this rope was holding the entire tower together. Somehow, wasn't quite sure what happened there, but yeah, he shoots a rope breaks, the supports that were holding the tower together that was being held by the rope fall apart, and then the tower falls over, crushes a bunch of orcs, and so we're all good there, I guess. You know, we're saved. Then after that, essentially we see where the villagers are, and the villagers are they're at the bottom of the ravine or the valley, and they're essentially preparing for the next assault. They've fled the mountain or the tower. They're in their village now, and they're essentially now going to hold up in the village. They're going to use the village as a defensive point, and they're going to try to survive. They've got a plan with putting archers on the houses. They're going to trap them in with a barricade and setting it on fire. So they've got it's a decent plan. It's honestly a decent plan. Is it the most realistic in that would orcs file in one by one across a single bridge and not just go around and surround the village? No, the orcs would 100% spread out, go around, and kind of try to surround them and flank them. But I mean, for what the plan sounds like, it's at least reasonable to me. It makes sense for what they have. We cut to we cut back to the boats, and oh, there's this really weird scene with Isildur's feeding an apple to a horse. He takes a bite out of the apple, and then he turns it and gives the horse the apple to take a bite. Then he takes it back. He then takes a bite out of the apple again, only then to go up top of the deck and throw the apple into the ocean. It was really, I don't know, it was really awkward to watch. You're like, dude, you're just gonna eat this apple that this horse like ate and slobbered all over? But what was great is that the apple is you can see the horse like munching on the apple, but when they remove the apple out of the horse's mouth, there's no actual bite there, but you still get the sound of the horse chewing. So I don't know if they like edited in an apple switch, or like it's a CG apple after the horse eats the whole apple. They're like, oh, the horse just ate the whole apple, but we still need the apple in the scene. So then they like CGI another apple in, or the camera technically like pans up so you can't see the apple anymore. So do they do an apple switch off camera? I don't know. But it was really weird. It was really weird.
Bori believes it must have been hauled on ropes north to
was there anything in my notes I wanted to mention before we continued on? No, fake apple. Oh yeah, so Isildur goes up onto the top deck. He chucks the apple into the ocean for who knows why. It kind of felt like it was a forced scene. We're like, okay, we need to get Isildur up on the top deck. Hello, Jedi. Hello, hello. Yeah, so they needed to get Isildur up on the top deck. So the only way they could come up with was this weird apple thing of like, okay, Isildur's gonna feed an apple to the horse, but then he needs a way to get rid of the apple. So he's gonna walk up to the top deck and throw it into the ocean to get rid of it, and now we can have the scene that we actually want, which is him talking to Galadriel, and then Elendil coming in, and then Galadriel asking. I decided in that last episode that Galadriel's a badass in combat. Okay, that's fair. She does some cool moves. And it looked a little bit weird, but it was cool. She does. I liked the hanging off the horse. I just didn't like she like pushed her sword into an orc, but the orc exploded, so I just didn't like the physics behind it. But I liked her hanging off the horse. That was, and like dodging arrows and stuff. That was very elf-like. So I like that. But yeah, Galadriel asks Elendil what happened to his wife or Isildur's mom. And then Elendil avoids the question by ranting about how he likes sunsets and sunrises. And then just answers the question after. It's like, oh, she drowned. Well, why didn't you just answer that to begin with? What did the sunrise and the sunset have to do with anything? Also, you live on an island continent. Do you not see the sunrise and sunset every single day? I don't know. It was really... After watching it a second time, it's almost like they filmed the scene in two different ways. They filmed it once with this weird sunset talk, and then they filmed it again and ignored that, and then put in the whatchamacallit, the answer to the question of the mum drowning. watching the episode a second time, it's like they took those two and spliced it together, and that's why it seems so awkward, because there's a whole bunch of cuts in it that I'm just like, wait, I wonder if they were actually two separate scenes and they wanted to just put them together because they couldn't decide which one to put in. I don't know. That's kind of how I felt watching it a second time. And then we learn that this is where things got really confusing for me. So we learned that they're essentially 2 to 3 days away from Mordor. Oh, here. Now, you know what? I wanted to pull up a map for this. Because this bothered me a lot, to the point where later in the episode, I actually got up and needed, like, a breather, because it drove me insane. I hope this is big enough. Okay, this should be big enough. So if we gotta do this. There we go. Good enough. Okay, so they're mentioning that they're 2 to 3 days away from Mordor. They're all the way, like, they're all the way out here. Numenor's over here. Who knows how far? I mean, it's probably like 3 or 4 days away, but whatever. Yes, and I was gonna get to that too, because I also wondered that. I kind of have an answer watching it a second time, but it was still a little bit iffy. But yeah, so they said that they needed 2 days to essentially go from out in the middle of the ocean to Mordor, which realistically, in the world that they're in, is not possible. You can't do it. But we'll ignore that. So they say that they can get there in 2 days. Fine. So they take a day to sail to land. They say they need 1 day to get to landfall, and then a second day of horse riding to get to Mordor. But what was weird to me is that, okay, so they established 2 days with Numenor, but only 1 day changed with the villagers. Because when we go back to the villagers, they're using the following day, because they just survived the first attack, for prepping for the next one. So it went from night to day. They're using that day to prep, and then it reaches nightfall again. So that's 1 full day, or like we can even say like 36 hours. So a day plus more of them preparing. It's nightfall, and then the orcs show up. And then that night, Numenor arrives. But only 1 day has passed when they just said it would take 2 days minimum. Oh no, it's good to have the questions here, because then I can answer the questions as we go on to those parts. So that's good that, yeah, just fill in all the questions, and then I can go through it once I'm done here. But yeah, so this is the journey that they had to take. Numenor's out here. I think they're supposed to land. They either landed here, or they sailed the boats up the river and then took the horses in. Regardless, horses can't run. I mean, I don't know much about horses, but I don't think horses could run full fight speed for a full day. But I don't know, maybe they're special horses. Rohan horses can't do that, and they're all about horses, so I don't know. Anyway, so we learn that Numenor is 2 days away. We go back to the villagers. They're prepping their battle. Theo has this weird chat with his mom about having nightmares when he was a kid and he needs hope. It was a nice talk. I just want to know what kind of nightmares Theo has, because this like motivational speech from mom from Bronwyn was like, "Oh, don't worry, never look at the darkness, always look for the light." And it was like this 3-minute like support speech, which was nice, but it was just like, oh my god, what kind of nightmares do you have? poor Theo's like having these nightmares about who knows what, because he's going into darkness in his dreams. Oh, here, I can now fix this. There we go. And then essentially we have the attack. The orcs are arriving, and let me just make sure we're not. Oh, right. So how did they know? How did Galadriel know about the town? So in the previous episode, or maybe it was 2 episodes ago, I don't know, but Halbrand mentions that he was from a town and that his village was overrun. He then points to where it was on a map. So I guess you could assume that the village, or the area that he pointed to, is the village in which Bronwyn and Arondir live in, essentially. That's never actually confirmed or not. He just points to a spot and Galadriel's like, okay, that is where we're going, and it just so happens by coincidence that's where Arondir and everyone is. So that's how they know where to go, but it doesn't answer the question, how do they know to get there so quickly? That's what I was confused about. Like, the village, yeah, exactly. The village was earlier overrun, and they were digging tunnels and stuff underneath it, and they kidnapped a bunch of people, but then when they go there again, everything's all fine. Like, there's no tunnels all of a sudden. Very weird, I agree. And not even, yes, exactly, not even the village knew about the orcs. Or they left once they found the tunnels. So then they left. But Halbrand wasn't there to begin with. So that's where it's like, that's where things get weird, and I don't understand. Because Halbrand's like, this is where my village was. And Galadriel's like, okay, we'll go there. And then somehow they arrive at the perfect time. But that stuff gets a little bit weird. So they're prepping for, the orcs are arriving. It's night. The orcs can now come out and fight. It's nighttime. And the first part of the plan falls on Bronwyn, who I think is completely useless. And I don't understand why she's the leader of the people, why they picked her, why they trust her with anything, but they do anyways. And the first part of the plan falls to her, and all she has to do is use flint and steel, essentially, to light like a torch, and then light this cart that's on fire, or that has a bunch of hay and oil in it, light that cart on fire, and push it into the orcs. But she's struggling really hard with lighting this torch on fire, to the point where an orc shows up. She then has to fight the orc. The orc kills this random innocent woman who's helping Bronwyn. She dies. Bronwyn then kills the orc, and then takes the orc's torch and lights the cart on fire, and then pushes it to the orcs. And then they push a second cart down from the other end of the town, and they essentially trap the orcs in like a circle of fire. And then from the houses above, they shoot arrows at them, which I thought was a smart plan. Except then, what I thought was really funny is all the orcs had to do to get out of this circle of fire was to like kick over a stick, and then a barricade fell over, and then they could just walk out. I thought that was really funny. They're just surrounded by fire, they're panicking, they're shooting arrows back at the villagers, and then this one orc's like, wait a minute, and he like kicks a stick and the barricade falls over, and then they just all walk out. So that was fun. Then there's a fight scene with, so Arondir's shooting a bunch of orcs, he gets pulled off of the roof, then he has a fight with a big bad guy, big buff orc. It was a cool fight. I just was confused on why the orc didn't have a weapon. Like, he shows up to fight Arondir with no weapon. Like, he's like, no, we're gonna go hand to hand, no weapon fight. And I don't know why. That logically doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why you would go to a fight with no weapon. But anyways, this orc has no weapon. They have a hand-to-hand combat brawl. For whatever reason, the orc's very nice and doesn't, like, just shove Arondir's face into a wall or, like, throat drop rocks on his head or curb stomp him, because he's throwing him around through fences and everything. And I just feel like this orc has so much strength where he could just, like, smash Arondir's face in, but he just doesn't. Arondir picks up, like, a chunk of a fence, stabs the orc a couple times, and then stabs him in the eye, and we get the most gruesome, disgusting scene I think I've ever seen in my life. It was so good, though. The effects of it were so good. Arondir stabs the orc in the eye, and then the orc pulls it out, and then, like, starts, like, choking Arondir up against a well, and then his eye is just gushing blood everywhere, and it's going in Arondir's mouth, it's going into Arondir's eyes. I'm just like, oh my god, that is not blood that you want in your eyeball. Orc blood in your eye does not sound good at all, for many reasons. Very gross, very gruesome, but it was it was entertaining. One of those, it's gross, it's so gross that I want to look at it, but not at the same time. And then Bronwyn saves him, because he was definitely gonna die there, but he didn't because Bronwyn saved him. They have a little moment. Then they fight off the orcs, and they're like, oh yay, we did it, because there's no more orcs. But then they realized that it wasn't just orcs there, that it was actually mostly men from the previous episode that separated from the village, right? Bronwyn in the last episode did her speech, and then the old guy, like, followed or led people out, like, no, we're gonna go fight for Sauron kind of thing. So those people that left the villagers were actually disguising themselves as orcs and showed up to this fight. And really all the other orcs were all around the village in the trees, like they should be, because they're not all gonna come in single file. They're all gonna be surrounding the village, and then they start peppering the village with arrows and take out a bunch of people. And then they get pushed back into, like, the bar, the tavern, I guess. Is there anything? Oh, I've noticed a continuity thing. So when Arondir's like looking up at the orc and the blood's falling all over his face, so he gets a whole bunch of blood on his mouth and, like, in his teeth, and then, like, on this side of his face. After Bronwyn kills the orc, the blood on this side of his face completely vanishes. He still has blood here. And then in the next scene, when he's talking to people, the blood all around his mouth also magically vanishes. So I liked how they wanted to keep him clean. I don't know. I thought that was odd that the blood magically vanishes twice. Oh, during the archers attacking, or the orc archers appearing and they start killing all the villagers, Bronwyn reacts to 2 arrows. I didn't notice this the first time, but the second time I noticed this. There's an arrow that zooms by the screen, like, in front of her, and I think it was an after effect, but so Bronwyn's there, she reacts to an arrow, and then she reacts again to a second arrow that then goes through her chest. But the first arrow doesn't actually hit her. It goes in front of her and, like, off and, like, hits the ground or something. But she still reacts to it. So I don't know if she was meant to have 2 arrows, and they realized that, like, it wouldn't work for the scene coming up where they, like, take the arrow out of her and stop the bleeding and everything and to keep her alive, and it wouldn't work with 2 arrows. Or in editing, they realized that, well, because obviously actors are just gonna, they're like, react to arrows hitting you. Go, go, go. So she just reacted to 2 arrows hitting her because that's just what she thought she needed to do. And then in editing, they realized, oh, she reacted to 2 arrows. Well, I guess we should try to find a way to make an arrow hit her but not stick in her. So I guess that's what they tried to do, and then they just left with the main one. But she definitely only ever has 1 arrow sticking out of her, even though she reacted to 2 arrows hitting her. Technically, the elf planted his seeds in her. Yes. So there's this whole, before the fight, Arondir talks about how elves will always plant seeds as a way to compensate, essentially, for life dying. You got to continue the cycle of life, right? So we're going to die, we're killing our enemies, so before we go off to battle, we're going to plant seeds so that new life can grow. And by doing so, the elf gods, the Valar, they will guide us in the battle and lead us to victory, kind of thing. So that was a little scene that he had with Bronwyn earlier. What he does with these seeds, though, is so when they take Bronwyn into the tavern to heal her wounds, he takes these seeds that he was planting earlier. He takes some more seeds, smushes them in Bronwyn's blood, and then like shoves them in her arrow wound. So yeah, he literally plants his seeds inside of her with her own blood, and then they cauterize the seeds into the wound. So now she just has these plant seeds in her. So she has elf seeds inside of her. It's a little weird, but I think it's part of the healing like the seeds are gonna like help heal her body or whatever, which is fun. But it's funny because yes, Arondir planted his seeds inside of her. She's gonna be the new white tree, just yeah. Oh, I almost, when this was all happening, I kind of wish they actually killed Bronwyn. I would have had major respect for Amazon if they actually killed Bronwyn here. And I was like, oh my god, they're gonna kill her. But they didn't. She goes into shock and then she wakes up and they're like, oh, thank god you're still alive. I was so sure she was dead and I was gonna laugh really hard and be really impressed, but that's okay. So at this point now, actually not quite yet. So now that the orcs have arrived, Adar's here and he comes in, they break into the tavern. And what I loved about this so much, and not enough villains do this in movies and shows, but Adar comes in and he asks Arondir once, where is the hilt? Give me the answer, or tell me where it is, or else people will start dying. Arondir just doesn't say anything. So without even Adar like motioning or talking to the orcs just immediately just start gutting all of these villagers instantly. And I love that so much because to me that actually seemed super realistic, and it was better than like most villains coming in being like, tell me what I want or else. I won't tell you. Oh yeah, are you sure? No, I won't tell you. Okay, bring over this one. And then they either then motion to the henchman to kill, or else then the hero's like, oh, okay, don't do it. But I liked how the orcs just immediately went to, we're killing people, let's go. Adar gave the word, the elf didn't answer, let's go, let's start getting rid of these villagers. So I liked that. And then, so this is where we now see Numenor's on horseback, and the horse footsteps, or like essentially a stampede, can be heard from the village. But only 1 day has passed for the village. But this is where I got confused, is 1 day for the village passed, yet somehow 2+ days passed for Numenor. I don't know. I didn't understand that. I was confused where the passage of time went. But, anyway, so they keep killing villagers. Then Adar's like, okay, fine. You know what? Let's look at Bronwyn. I'll kill Bronwyn. Are you gonna answer me now? And Arondir is freaking out. Theo, Bronwyn's kid, says, I'll tell you where the hilt is. And then, essentially Theo tells them the secret of where the hilt is. Theo gives them the hilt. The footsteps can be heard of the horses, and this was, yeah, exactly. It was middle of the night of the night 1 second, and then next it was midday with all the horses coming to the rescue. Exactly. Like, yeah, it went from night to day very quickly. But yeah, so this is where your question was, where did the weapon switcheroo happen? So the hilt is wrapped in, we'll call it some cloth. We'll call it, or a rope. We'll call it a rope. So the hilt is wrapped in a rope. Adar looks to his henchman, the older gentleman that ran the tavern, who led the rebellion of the people, essentially. Adar gave it, or said to him, I have a job for you. I don't know if he physically gave the hilt to the old guy, but he did say, I have a job for you. And then it cut to the horses arriving and killing everyone. How did the old guy escape? Who knows? Maybe it's because he didn't look like an orc, actually, and Numenor didn't kill him. But that's where the switcheroo happened. Even though it wasn't like, it would have been better if they actually showed a switcheroo, or even just if they showed Adar physically giving the old guy the hilt, then it would have been easier to follow, or just made more sense, because it did kind of come out of nowhere. But after watching it a second time, I found that moment of, oh, he does specifically say, I have a job for you. Numenor shows up magically. They got here way faster than they should have, but whatever. They kill a bunch of orcs. Orc shoots an arrow at Galadriel. She's dodging arrows on the horse. Somehow, I know the orcs have robes and hoods, but we're midday now, so the sun's out. It's not cloudy anymore. I mean, there's a little bit of cloud, but it's not really cloudy. There's a lot of sun. Essentially, if you're like facing one way, you're in sunlight. But if you're facing the other way, you're in clouds. So I kind of get a little confused on where the sun burns the orc stuff, because there's a couple of scenes where like orcs are like clearly looking up into the light and they're fine, or like they're laying on the ground and the sun is hitting their face but nothing's happening. So I don't know. I want some more clarification on when the sun hurts them. In the fight with the orcs and Numenor, Halbrand saves Elendil, and I just thought it was the most obvious foreshadowing of Sauron. Halbrand's like, haha, I saved you, when it's funny because Sauron is the one that kills Elendil later, and with, Halbrand being Sauron, I just thought it was really obvious what they were trying to show there. At least it was pretty obvious to me, and I thought it was kind of funny. And then Galadriel shows up, and Arondir tells Galadriel, chase down Adar. He has something important that we need. Don't let him escape. She chases after him. And then they cut to Halbrand, and he gives like this weird, like, I need to go follow her look, but I'm not going to go the same way she is. I'm going to go a different way. For whatever reason. He deliberately goes a different way than she does. So then they have this chase. Galadriel's chasing Adar through the woods. She does the Glorfindel or Arwen Nori Lean, which means ride fast or go faster in Elf. So that's a callback to Arwen when she's saving Frodo, or Glorfindel in the book saving Frodo, which was kind of fun. And then she's caught up to Adar, but then out of nowhere, on like the other side of the forest, Halbrand now shows up and takes out a spear and trips the horse that Adar's riding. No idea where he came from. I mean, we know earlier that he deliberately went a different way, but how did he know that they would be here? I don't know. But anyways, he comes from the other direction, trips the horse that Adar's on, and then they made Amazon made a deliberate effort to show, don't worry, the horse is okay, even though realistically that horse has broken legs and is probably dead. But they spent like 10 seconds showing the horse like shaking it off and getting up and walking away. And I just thought it was really weird, and it kind of took me out of the moment, because it just felt really forced and deliberate. They're like, oh, we can't show that any animals were harmed in the making of this show, even though no one actually believes that they killed a real horse. We all know it's fake, it's a movie, but okay, Amazon, glad that you support horses, I guess. And then Halbrand goes to... he goes to Adar and says, do you know who I am? Adar says no, and Halbrand kind of does like a, okay, good kind of nod, and then goes to like want to kill him. Galadriel freaks out and is like, no, we need him for information, don't kill him. I need him alive, don't do it. Fair enough, he could have some information. They get the hilt from him, or the robe, right? The robe that's wrapped around the hilt. They get that from Adar, and then Galadriel starts questioning Adar. And she's like, "Who are you?" He just says, well, he then says that he's not an orc, he's an Uruk. And he makes that very clear. Like, she keeps calling him orc, and he keeps correcting her, says Uruk, not orc. That happens like multiple times. And he essentially says that he was working for Sauron at one point, up in the north. Sauron was doing crazy experiments with dark magic on orcs. This upset Adar because Adar feels personally connected to all orcs. So Adar killed Sauron by cutting him in half, and then fled with the orcs. He fled with the orcs from the north, all the way to the Southlands. So, and he says this earlier, actually. He says the line, like, from Ered Mithrin to Ered Duath. That's how far they've traveled. So I'm gonna bring up the map here. It's Bestie. Hey, Bestie. We are talking about the most recent Rings of Power episode. Glad you could join us, though. Hold on. So, in the beginning of the episode, Adar actually has the line, "We wandered from Ered Mithrin to Ethel Duath," or something like that. And then he's referencing that up in the north, Sauron was doing all of these experiments and whatnot. So all of that happened, I guess, up here. So the very first episode, when they're climbing the ice mountains, or wandering the snow, Galadriel and her company were up here because these are the Ered Mithrin mountains. And I guess like they essentially missed Adar, or like just missed him, because he goes on and says that him and all these orcs traveled from up here and essentially just went straight south through these mountains and began settling down here and digging tunnels. And he cares about these orcs a lot. He was mad at Sauron for doing experiments on them, and so he killed Sauron. Galadriel, of course, doesn't believe him. He kind of just says, well, whatever, it happened. Right, so that's a good question, Jedi. And I mean, I'll start by saying he's definitely not dead, and he never, I mean, even in the books, he never did die. Like, that's not a thing, but I have a theory on what Amazon's doing. I don't like it, but I'll get to the theory in just a second. But that is a very good question, because you are absolutely right. He does make the Rings of Power, so how is he dead? No, you're all good. It's a good question. It's a good question, because Amazon is making it very confusing, so it's a very good question. So Galadriel doesn't believe him, and then she just goes to, you know what? I'm threatening you. Tell me what I want to know. He says no. It would be fun just to have a conversation about all this, so I understand all. Oh, exactly. So Adar says no. Galadriel then goes to threatening him and says, "I will kill every one of your offspring before I kill you, so that when you're the last one alive, I can tell you that I killed every single one of them, and that'll be like the last thing you hear as I kill you," which was, I don't know, it was a little extreme for Galadriel, but I don't know, it was weird. Then but as she's threatening him, Halbrand stops her, and then Adar asks Halbrand who he is. Halbrand stands there and then walks away, doesn't answer the question. Now this is the theory, and this is what I think is gonna happen here, Jedi. So Adar said that he killed Sauron. Halbrand was curious if Adar knew who he was. Adar said no. So this is what I think happened. Halbrand was Sauron, under the guise of Anatar, who looks more like an elf. So Halbrand looked like Anatar, did all these crazy experiments. Adar killed Anatar, but because you can't kill Sauron, his spirit will go elsewhere, essentially, until his body reforms and becomes a new body, essentially, a new person. So I think Adar killed Sauron. Sauron made his new body as Halbrand, and Halbrand recognizes Adar and was curious if Adar could piece together who he actually was. But he didn't know who he was, so he's like, okay, cool, I'm gonna kill you now, though, just to make sure that this secret doesn't get out. So that's how they defend, like, oh, Sauron's not actually dead, but Adar still killed Sauron. So it's like Adar's correct in that he did kill Sauron, but Galadriel's correct because Sauron's still alive, because Sauron is actually Halbrand under a new disguise. I think that's what Amazon's trying to do. Sauron's like Voldemort. Essentially, yes. The Ring of Power is one of the Horcruxes. You can look at it the exact same way. The Ring of Power is a Horcrux. You can't kill Sauron until you kill the Horcrux, the One Ring, once you kill the One Ring, or the Horcrux, then Sauron dies. But he doesn't even die. His spirit just moves on to the afterlife, and that's it. So yeah, I think so. That's kind of that theory that Adar killed Sauron. Sauron became Halbrand. Halbrand is Sauron in a new disguise, trying to figure out where he fits in the world before he makes the Rings of Power. So now we get to what actually happened with the hilt. So Galadriel gives the hilt to Arondir. Arondir gives the hilt to Theo because Theo's struggling with like, oh, without the hilt I feel hopeless and lost, and I felt powerful when holding it, kind of essentially referencing the ring. And then Arondir says, give it to the Númenóreans, and then the Númenóreans can chuck it in the ocean, then we'll never have to see it again. Good enough. I think that's a good idea. Theo then, at this point, opens up the robe, and it's not actually a hilt, it's an axe. So somehow, 5 different people, Halbrand, Galadriel, so 4, Arondir, Theo, all held this robe with the hilt in it, and none of them knew that it wasn't actually the hilt and it was actually an axe. I don't know. I thought that was a little weird. But yeah, so that was the twist, is that Adar told the old henchman, here's the hilt, I'm going to take a fake one, you're going to take the hilt and essentially use it to unlock the mystery, which was the old man is back at the tower where the elves were staying, where the villagers were staying with Arondir. He puts the hilt, he turns it, it essentially starts a chain reaction to releasing a lake into the tunnels that the orcs were building. The tunnels lead to a mountain. Underneath the mountain is lava. The water rushes into the lava, builds up steam, mountain explodes. It's a volcano. Essentially, yes. I think that was your other question, is that it is the mountain or volcano is Mount Doom. It's most definitely Mount Doom. What I was curious about is, so the whole thing around this hilt is that the hilt is used as a key to turn the mechanism to start, essentially, to open up the dam to let the lake flow into the tunnels. But it was said in like the first 2 episodes or whatever that the elves built the tower. So, and that's what I'm confused of like, who built this tower? Was it the elves who built the tower? And then secretly Sauron made a statue of himself in the wall, or a sculpture of himself in the wall, and made this secret mechanism in the tower that would result into essentially creating Mordor? Or did Sauron build it years before the elves, and then the elves settled in the tower later and just didn't, and then let the tower have this creepy sculpture of Sauron and not do anything to it? Because Arondir knew it was there. When he saw the hilt, he's like, oh my god, it's a key. And he's like, oh, it's a key to this thing. But, so all the elves knew about it, but they didn't do anything to it to, like, stop anything from happening? Like, essentially, if the elves destroyed the sculpture, then the key wouldn't work. Or the hilt wouldn't work as a key. I don't know. I just thought that was really weird. And then the episode ends with, the volcano blowing up. All of this ash, smoke, lava rushing into the village. And I guess killing everyone? Like, I mean, we know everyone's not, or most people aren't dead. Like, obviously Galadriel, Isildur, Elendil, probably the Queen, and then I would also assume Arondir, Bronwyn, and Theo can't die. I mean, Galadriel, Isildur, and Elendil 100% can't die, because Galadriel never doesn't die ever in Lord of the Rings, and Elendil and Isildur die to Sauron thousands of years later, or well, I guess hundreds of years later in this case. But I don't think a normal person, or anyone for that matter, could survive like molten hot ash, fire, and lava, like just steaming past them, like just overwhelming them. Like she just get like Galadriel. The last shot is Galadriel getting engulfed in ash, lava, and fire. But we're supposed to assume that she's okay and everyone else dies? I don't know. I'm curious. That's where the episode ends, so I'm curious on how they explain why she lives, or these other specific characters live, but everyone else dies. But then that also brings up the point of, wait, so they bring an entire army of Numenor to this village only to die to a volcano? I also just thought that was kind of weird. They go through all this effort of setting up Galadriel, getting the Numenorean armies, convincing the Queen to come sail to Middle Earth, and all of this stuff, only to kill the entire army to a volcano. I just thought that was very odd. But I don't know, maybe none of them died. Maybe none of them died, and it's just a bunch of ash. But I mean, the shot like actually shows lava encroaching with the smoke, and there's like fire coming out of the smoke. There's even lightning in the ash and the smoke. So I don't know, that seems like a pretty deadly shockwave of ash that's coming at them. But I guess we'll see how they survive, if they survive. And that's it. That's how the episode ends. Again, overall, it was a little bit more entertaining than the previous episodes. There's some good moments. There's still some weak moments. Curious how it goes next episode. I really hope they don't just say, all right, cut there. Now let's show you Elrond and the dwarves and the hobbits. If that happens, I'm going to be really upset. I need some closure on who the heck and how the heck these people survived a volcano. I mean, like, we all know I'm sure people know what happened with Pompeii, the city of Pompeii, the story of Pompeii in Greece. Like, no one survived that volcano. Mount Doom is much stronger than that volcano. So, I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's it. Was there any other questions or thoughts that people wanted to bring up? Any other talking points that needed to be brought up that I missed? Or that people liked that they wanted to discuss? Before we end our review here, I think I got all the questions. I'll double check. How did Galadriel know the town needed help? Yes. When did the weapon switcher happen? Yeah, we did that. The volcano convention. Yes. Yeah, Bronwyn's motivational speech and her dream speech was very weird. Technically, I'll plant a seed. Tree. Yeah, I guess that was. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. All right. Well, I thank you all for joining me on our episode 6 review. We have 2 more episodes. The final episode comes out on the 14th. I think. Yeah, there's only 2 more episodes. Predictions are Halbrand is still Sauron. Adar killed Sauron and as Anatar, and so now Sauron is Halbrand. Still think Meteor Man is Gandalf. I think we're gonna get a Balrog here pretty quick, with the dwarves digging. That could be fun. Guess we'll see what happens in these next 2 episodes. Those are my predictions, though, so we'll see if I'm right, or if we'll even get any answers. Who knows? For all we know, we'll never know who Sauron is, or maybe Sauron's actually dead, and someone else makes the Rings of Power. I don't know. But yeah, thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.